You'll see Facebook Live on.
And
Yeah.
very good. We have got it. We are rolling. So good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, for joining us this evening. And we are very excited to be here this evening on Mynoo's Nugget of Wisdom. This time we are going to be talking about interconnection, relationships, and I'm extremely excited about this one because I think it's something that we're going to go very deep with. And there are issues we have perhaps with family, with friends, with our work environment, with ourselves mainly. And Mynoo is going to really guide us through this tonight and show us some actual solutions, which we love. We call her the solutionary. And we love to have her. And for those in Facebook Live land who don't know Maryel, she is an author, a very, very wise soul from India originally, but she is a global citizen now. And she does beautiful workshops and teachings of all kinds. And we are in for a treat tonight. So I believe, Mynoo, it is time for me to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Sunny. And you will take care of the waiting room. And I look forward to our session today. It's interesting. We have 2 pearls of wisdom left, and we keep having these nuggets that wanting to be the ones that are prioritized. This one is a pretty heavy duty one. So let's see what emerges.
Indeed, indeed. So I will let you take it away, and everyone just get ready for our magic carpet ride.
Thank you. Thank you. So the first thing I would say is, let's just begin by understanding these words: independence, codependence, interdependence. What do they actually even mean, so that we are all on the same page before we start looking at the signs that allow us to diagnose where we are at. So independence, if we just take a very standard dictionary definition, I have a slightly different definition, which I will also share. But the dictionary definition basically is it's freedom from control, influence, support from someone else or aid from someone else. But it's always about, like being free from someone else. The way I like to define independence is it is really about the dependence within. Once you're able to get and feel that you are worthy, you can trust you, and you can depend within yourself, that's where the true unleashment of freedom actually begins. Let's look at codependence. Became a little bit of a jargon at one point, and I think it still is used quite liberally in relationships. It really is an unhealthy dependence in relationships. A codependent will do anything to hold on to a relationship, to avoid feeling that sense of abandonment. It also is denoted by an extreme need for approval and recognition. And often a sense of guilt is used, and it's often implied with asserting yourself. Overall, it really is a compelling need to control others. And that's really what codependence is. It may be packaged in the form of, there's great love between us. I love you so much. And that's why I'm doing this. And we'll look at the signs in a moment. And I'll apply those signs to these 3 different explanations of dependence that we are talking about. But overall, codependence it's an unhealthy dependence because it's propelled by a compelling need to control. And whilst I say, because it is codependent, it is a compelling need to control others, but it really is a compelling need to be in control. Interdependence, a little bit of more, it's starting to get used more and more. Interdependence is where a group of people or things, they depend on each other. And there is a recognition that, there is, we do require to depend on each other. Like, I would use an example of bees, lots of bees being killed. But now there is a growing understanding that we actually do require the bees as much as the bees require, this environment. This is a whole idea about climate change that people are starting to get concerned about. And it's happening at all levels, all strata of society. So there is an understanding that we do depend on each other. There's an interdependence realization that is occurring. Dependence, so let's look at what is dependence itself. Dependence is really about one person relying on another person or thing. Interdependence is a mutual reliance and a mutual realization that we do depend on each other, and therefore there is an automatic respect, mutual respect that interdependence tends to get fueled by. It is very much about being interconnected with others. Often a situation where two or more people, they interact with each other knowing that their actions have an effect on the other and the other's action have an effect on them. So people are a little bit more discerning, more conscious, more aware of their actions and their choices. And I'm about to talk to you about the 7 signs that will enable you to diagnose where you may be in any particular situation. So let's look at what is a sign itself. A sign, it could be a motion, a gesture, a thought, or a way in which it is all expressed, a command or a wish in the way it is being made known. Sign, as a signpost, is also often an object, or it could be an event or a happening that indicates the presence or an occurrence of something else. So the sign itself is not this other thing, but it is the occurrence of something else. It's an indication that something else may actually be at play. So let's now dive into the 7 signs, which enable you to identify where you're at. And remember, what we're talking about here, my overarching intention is to equip people in such a way that they can enjoy exquisite, enchanting relationships in any situation without putting blinkers on, staying real without necessarily hoping for the best at some point, but really being real and experiencing the fullness of what that relationship is about. So the 7 signs that will enable you to identify where you're at. The first one is language. The language that you are using. Remember, my intention here with these pearls of wisdom, with these nuggets of wisdom, is to equip each one of us such that we retain an unknowingness that we can do something about our own situation. So when I talk about language, yes, you can actually observe other people's language and say, this relationship is a codependent one. And that's fine if it stops there. If you then start wanting to fix it, Understand where you're coming from, first of all. What is your motivation? Fixing something does not actually solve or resolve anything. You can raise people's awareness. Many ways, that's really what I do. I raise people's awareness and give them practical tools that ultimately it is your choice. And I honor that. Now, language is definitely an indication. So let's say you are in a relationship, and that relationship could be to another person. It could be to an institution. It could be to food. It could be to substances. It could be to work. It could be to a particular way of doing something. If you find your language starting to go into like there's a persistent complaint that you keep coming up with, right? This person, oh gosh, I've got to go spend time with this person. This person's always such a drain on my energy. So if there is a persistent complaint, you're actually creating a racket. Now, that persistent complaint could be because you are either you feel that this person is actually taking your independence away, and that may be for a period of time. So if your thing is you don't feel anything, it is just a conscious expression that you have. Look, when I talk about I always look at everything in a full spectrum way, and that's what I guide you to do. Full spectrum is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and environmental. So physically, you have an expression, which is your language. And it could be one of, oh gosh, I've got to go spend time with this person. Again, not again. Now, when you have an expression like that, then it probably is just an expression of where you feel for that duration, your independence is going to be taken away. Where you'll be in this experience with this other person, which is not fulfilling at all. So there you know that actually there is no codependence or anything like that. You're just feeling as if this person now is going to take your independence away for that duration of time. Now, you could choose to then change your language immediately and decide that, okay, I'm choosing to go spend, because you can choose, you can unchoose anything at any time. You can unchoose wanting to go spend time with, or having to go spend time with anyone. So the question to ask yourself, if I didn't choose to, if I didn't have to, if I didn't need to, would I choose to do this? And if you would choose to do this, in that case, you suddenly become dependent within. You've suddenly unleashed yourself. And now, okay, fine, I'm choosing to. Now you can be in the freedom of interdependence, where there is a mutuality in the time that you are going to now exchange with each other. And you can then decide how are you going to serve yourself in such a way that it is an uplifting experience when you spend this time with this person. But when we go and slide into, oh gosh, not again, then immediately you have chosen to take your own freedom away. Nobody takes our freedom away. Really, nobody does. We do that by giving that power away. And the way we do that is by sliding into a have to or need to as the driver for choosing to do something. When I was just working through these, we can spend a whole year on looking at different types of relationships in the context of these three that we are talking about. And I'm going to give you all of that packaged in a matter of few minutes. But when I was looking at this language part, I recalled a very special, one of those memorable moments that I have experienced in my life. And this was a salon, a Divya Milan salon that I was doing in Maui, in Hawaii. And one of the guests in that salon was a 103-year-old man. I can't recall if he was 103 or 106, but he certainly did not look that way. He looked more like in his late 50s. And then it turned out that he had been in solitary confinement for 36 years in China. And I'm like humbled completely, and for me, it was like, why are you here listening to me? I want to listen to you. But look at you. And he was smiling and beaming all the time. There's something so special about him. I was so curious. I mean, talk about independence, codependence, I was like, what happened? How did you even get through this? What used to happen? What did you do with your day? And before I went, I had all these questions. And then he says, ask me one question. And I said, okay, the question I want to ask you is, what were the first words you used when you came out of jail, out of solitary confinement? And he said, when he came out, he was turned over, like literally, his body was like this. His head was very close to the floor because he just hadn't stood up straight, because it was a very, very small area that he was in. And he says, when I came out, I looked at the sun, I looked at the earth, I felt the warmth of the sun, and the only words that came out were, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm like, what were you thanking about? And he says, well, the earth, the sun, the birds, the smells, the rustling of the leaves, everything was there for me to think about. That they waited, they were there, they were exactly as I recalled and remembered and imagined them inside. And I was like, whoa, so I said to him, what did you feel about what had occurred with you? That like these people took your independence away. And he said, I felt that, but that only lasted a few days. Because what was the point? The only codependent, because we talked about these three types of relationships at that time. And he said, the only codependence I think I had was to that hand that slid through this hole in the wall every day with the bowl of kanji once a day. And I would be dependent. I was like really looking forward to that. For 3 or 4 days, sometimes that hand wouldn't come. And everything that we would have when a lover betrays us are the feelings that he would go into. So there he was in solitary confinement, totally and completely independent, depending within himself. And the interdependence relationship that he maintained for himself was with nature. And what had occurred basically was, it was in between the Russians and the Japanese that came into China, that his wife was having an affair with one of the generals, either the Russian or the Chinese or the Japanese, I don't quite remember. And she accused him falsely of siding with the People's Party. And that's how he got arrested and put into solitary confinement. The People's Party came in, they took over China, and many of these solitary confinement prisoners were forgotten. And many of those areas were even forgotten. So the hand with the kanji kept continuing for his 36 years until somebody realized that, hey, there is this prison that is there, and that's how he got released. I asked him, what did you do? What was your day like? And they were all indicators of how he thought about what was going on. when I was listening to him, I truly felt if there is freedom unleashed, he was a role model of freedom unleashed in solitary confinement. This thing that I say it with great conviction. Nobody can take your dignity away. Nobody can take your freedom away. It is a matter of your choice to give it. And according to him, he did give it when he felt that betrayal and upset and anger towards what had occurred with his wife, and that nobody was interested in knowing his side of the story. He was just dumped in. And he says, it's only when I gave up on that and developed a new relationship, one of trust, with this hand that would come in with Kanji. Because the walls of solitary confinement were so thick that there was no communication that could happen. Since by that time, my throat was sore with the screaming and shouting that I had done. There were rashes and all sorts of stuff going on with my hands and things like that, with all the banging I had done on the walls, which had made no difference. And it is only after all of that I went within myself and dependence within set in. And I made a conscious choice to retain that attachment to that hand with Kanji through the wall. What this man went on to do, by the way, there's an amazing body of work called the I Ching that the Chinese use as a way of getting an answer to any question you may have. And he in solitary confinement, actually, I would say, made the I Ching accessible for the Western world. He did not know English, but he made this secret, sacred body of work more accessible to the rest of the world. He created a body of work on intimacy and romance. Can you imagine being in solitary confinement? And it was really quite phenomenal, because a friend of mine would transcribe for years after he had come out of solitary confinement. For years, she was transcribing what he would say. And he would often talk about it in the form of images. So I asked him, I'm seeing this book of intimacy. There's the Kama Sutra in India, and there's his body of work that is pretty phenomenal as well. And I said, well, did you draw these on the walls? What happened? And he said, I didn't know I'd been inside for 36 years. Because every day, it was an endless limit. I just thought I was suddenly in the presence of a limitless state of wonder. There wasn't a start to the day. There wasn't an end. It just was. So I realized much later that there were many days that the hand with Kanji wouldn't come, but I wouldn't necessarily be aware of it even, because there was no start and there was no finish. It was just an ongoing continuum. And in that state, I saw these images. It's like my eyesight became very sharp. My hearing became very pronounced. My learning of the sensory system came from my dialogue with this amazing man. And it was a few years ago. I'm talking about 2014, 2016, between that time frame when I would spend quite a lot of time in Maui. And it was through his language that I really got that, my gosh, this guy at best was independent, freedom unleashed in the way I define independence, and retained that interdependence with nature. And hence he was able to recover and restore himself. I mean, and I said to him, if all of this was only in your mind, weren't you afraid that you would forget it all? And he said, no, it was written. It was written in me. It was written everywhere. I would not forget it. Like my friend who's Chinese origin, but really born and brought up in the US, she understands Chinese because her parents brought her up that way to really know the language well. Mandarin is what she understood. And she said that she uses a dialect, which is like, I've not heard this dialect before. So it took her quite a while to understand what he was actually communicating. So language is a sign. Look at what is your language. Look at what is your language in terms of your own relationship to yourself, first of all. You know, if you are feeling that you really are attached to some persistent complaint about, if only my parents hadn't done this, or if only that hadn't happened to me, 30 years later, you're still saying this. You're in a codependent relationship to that happening, to that occurrence. You're holding on to it, allowing it to control you. I always thought that codependence was with a person. But if you look at what is codependence, you can be codependent on a truth or a belief that you're holding true. This guy could have held on to, cannot trust people, they betray you. He completely transformed to, whatever happens, there is someone out there, another human being who is looking out for me and will bring me that bowl of nourishment every day. I could easily have held on to, I did nothing and she betrayed me. She was betraying me all along and completely destroy all his relationships. There's a body of work that I do about romance. And I learned about romance is a lifestyle. Once you choose that lifestyle for you, you can experience and enjoy romance anywhere, with anyone. Whilst you don't choose that lifestyle for yourself, you're putting too much undue pressure on another relationship to deliver that to you. And after a while, that relationship can cave in under the burden of that pressure of romance. I learned the basics of this philosophy of romance as a lifestyle from this 103-year-old man or 103 young man. And we spent quite a long time, more than half an hour, really talking about these understanding of these terms and the first sign itself. Watch out for your language. If you have a persistent complaint that you're coming up, any persistent complaint, however justified it may be, gives you a way of being. And when you are being that way, the complaint is activated. When you're complaining, it activates this way of being. And after a while, you start being that way. That becomes your way in which you show up, either in a relationship or whatever it is that you're linking it to. I certainly have had in the past a codependent relationship on food. And I'm so delighted that that is the freedom that I've achieved this year, where it's become an interdependence. It's quite a healthy interdependence that I've moved to. So just know, whilst we're talking about it in the context of relationship, it's not limited to just a human. Let's look at the second sign. The second sign is when you start experiencing loneliness. Loneliness is a state of being alone, feeling sad about it, right? So loneliness is different than being alone. I love being alone. I don't feel lonely. So loneliness is a state of being alone and feeling sad about it. And it can lead to various things. It may just lead you to sit at home, listen to depressing songs, or or it might even inspire you to go out and meet people. But when you feel sad about it, you do wallow in that sadness for a bit. Now, this man, the solitary confinement man, he was alone. And boy, was he alone. He had the wisdom of the I Ching. He came from quite a noble strata of Chinese society. So I Ching was something that he had various, people that he would go to. So he had a good understanding of why and where and when he would use it. And he started the use of I Ching in the solitary confinement to understand why his wife did what she did. That's how it began. And then he started actually, unveiling layers and layers of the I Ching and became more and more respectful of this amazing body of work. But it began with an incident which he felt took his freedom away. And then when he started depending within, loneliness disappeared. And he really reclaimed the alone time that he now had to delve deep and truly understand the wisdom behind this sacred body of work. And in the way he understood it, because he wasn't trained in any of the Chinese, they were like households that were privy to the I Ching knowledge. He didn't come from there because he was understanding it, he was deciphering it. He then did what I often ask many of us to do, many of you to do, which is go back to moments in time in your life and use the pearl of wisdom to understand what actually was occurring. He did exactly the same thing. He took the I Ching body of work and kept going back to answer questions, all unanswered questions that he ever had about anything. He answered using the I Ching. He developed an amazing respect and realization of, whilst his physical body was in no state to do anything, his mind and his thoughts could. He realized the power of his mind to give him this enriching experience that set him free. And he retained that interdependence with nature and with nothing else. Even like he said to me, I had that codependent relationship with that hand with the bowl of kanji. And he said, well, I don't know if it was a kanji or if it was a hand in the bowl, but just that belief that there is someone out there that is always looking out for me is really what I valued. And I could step away from that codependence. My world didn't crash if this hand didn't show up for an extended period of time. So loneliness was not his reality at all. Alone, time was. And he chose to put it to good use. In being alone, you can be in a state of independence, which is depending within yourself. And you can certainly value interdependence, where you respect the value and the worth of another person because you know you are worthy. And I recall another time when I was first getting used to the idea of silence meditations. And I was in Perth, Australia. And I'd chosen to go to a monastery as I was guided intuitively to be on 15 days of silence. And this was a 94-acre estate that I was in. And I was the only person living there. And I had got the agreement from the head monk that I would share the lunch with the rest of the monks in the monastery itself, not in this, solitary place that I was in. I chose for most of the time not to do that, because when I went into this space, I took my Vitamix with me and lots of raw foods. So I was excited to just, live that kind of a lifestyle. The amazing thing was, I was super excited about it. And, there was only one moment that I distinctly remember experiencing a state of loneliness, alone with sadness accompanied. And that was on the first day itself, first evening. I go to the temple that was there within this particular center. This was the retreat center of this monastery. So there was a temple, a Buddhist temple. So I went there in the afternoon and I just was in silence. And it was there that I got this whole body of work of being truly, madly, deeply in love with yourself. So I'm there, I've got my journal, I'm meditating, and I'm writing profusely. And this is automatic writing. So whatever is coming through me, I'm expressing it, writing it. And then I come out, little did I realize I'd spent 4 to 6 hours in there. So when I cut out, it is pitch dark. But it was full moon that day. So I expected there to be moonlight. And there were 64 cottages, and one of those cottages was mine that I was going to stay in. So I come out of the temple and I'm standing in this area where the pagoda is, but it's pitch dark. Even the pagoda is black. So I know the feel of the structure, but I can't see anything. We never had the kind of iPhones we had now. We used to have those tiny little Nokias, and I didn't really know how to work the light on that Nokia. And that was the only time where I felt that loneliness, a state of being alone and feeling sad about it. And I decided to just simply be. I took my slippers off, connected to the earth, so I could just ground out whatever this feeling was that was like a little bit destabilizing for me. Just gave it over to the earth. And I just stood there, with my fingers facing forward and fingertips stretched and just connecting to the earth. And I don't know at what point my head just went back and I was looking at the sky. There were no clouds, nothing. It was just dark. And I said, Moon, you are there somewhere. Show me so that I can go and sleep at home. Because at this point, I couldn't even get back into the temple. I just couldn't see anything. The pupils had adjusted, but there was just no light at all. Lots of sounds because we were surrounded by jungle. And suddenly the clouds parted, which would just look like a sky, but actually it was a big dark cloud. Parted, the moon came up. I saw where my cottage was and I walked there. Loneliness was gone forever. It was that experience of loneliness that I had. It was a piercing sadness. It was and in those few minutes that I experienced that loneliness, I was into, what am I doing to myself? Why have I left everything behind? What if I didn't do this? What if somebody else did this to me? Like, my goodness, my mental state was running at God knows how many knots an hour. And I wasn't able to even ground that it was moving so fast. It only lasted a few minutes. And it was in that desperation of just stopping these thoughts that I allowed my head to slide down. And lo and behold, the moon showed up. But I got connected to what people go through when they say, I feel so lonely. I learned to respect that. I also became very aware that whilst I had done so much work, there were so many codependencies that I had pushed to one side. Okay, that's not my way anymore. But the codependent energy signature was still hidden in my field, was still there. And it was that 15 days of silence that made me choose that I was going to move to Bali from Perth, Australia. And 3 weeks became 9 years. And I was never lonely again. I had tons of alone time, and I valued that alone time. But I did not brush off this complaint of loneliness. It's a persistent complaint you have. I totally respect it. When people talk about this, and okay, there are ways in which I support them to reconnect to what the reality is. The reality is that, okay, you have some alone time and you make it mean something that anchors sadness. That is just a meaning that is there's no reality to it. Lonely we are not. So this man that I was talking about earlier on, he maintained his interdependence with nature, but that helped him convert his loneliness into an enriching, uplifting alone time. That got him to create 2 phenomenal bodies of work that continue to serve us to this day. The third sign is abandonment. When you feel a sense of abandonment, and abandonment is an instance where, instance of leaving something or someone permanently and completely. And it can be positive also. But when it is to do with a person, it sometimes leaves you feeling unfulfilled. Or it leaves you feeling, WTF, I'm just going to move on from here. But actually, you haven't really moved on. So when you experience that somewhere, or when you experience that someone else has abandoned you, and you are holding on to that as your reality, there is dollops and dollops of codependent energy in you. Even if that person or that situation does not exist in your life. I remember as a food addict, right? Having this codependent relationship with food. And many of you know, and have experienced and seen me go, have this yo-yo experience with my weight. It's more than just food that addresses the weight issue. However, whilst I was in that space, when people would say, oh, maybe you need to change what you eat, or maybe you just skip a meal, or just fast for a while, and I would just go into, you're asking me to abandon someone that has been there with me through thick and thin and gives me that wonderful comfort, when I just and doesn't ask me for anything. You're asking me to abandon that? What if food was a person? Would you abandon a person like that? What are you talking about? So that's how I knew that, codependent. I am so attached to keeping that control of, having the freedom to choose food at least. Then I was allowing it to control me. That was the big realization early this year. And then, of course, the work that I've done on synchronization of my circadian set points is what actually set me free physiologically, because it was so physiological and mental, and it would have it was triggered by emotion. And I'm talking about food and my previous addiction to food, but it applies to all forms of addiction. A codependent relationship is one, it has all the hallmarks of an addict. We sometimes become just codependent on the dysfunctionalness in a particular situation, and we just hold it in place. You've heard me talk about happiness, some of you, but I talk about happiness is only a decision you make. It's one side of a decision-making coin. It is a decision you make, joy is the action you seek. The other side of happiness is suffering. It's a decision you make, and pain is a justification you seek. Suffering comes from codependent. Happiness as a decision literally sets you free, because you know that you just now depend on you to take actions that give you joy. Suffering, on the other hand, you're very attached to some form of codependence somewhere. And hence, your language often comes up with persistent complaints. So abandonment is a sign. And you can, once you get that, oh, it's a sign that, oh, there's codependence going on somewhere, where is it? And it's a choice I've made. Nobody controls me. I don't control anyone. I can choose to then look at, where do I feel I can depend on me? Reclaim your power a little bit before you just rush into, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be in interdependence. You will not be able to move from codependence to interdependence that easily. You know, because codependence becomes like a survival thing. Every part of your body and your mind will not let you step away from it until you actually acknowledge how it is playing out and everything that you feel it is important for you to control. Only acknowledge, don't need to do anything. Once you've done that, acknowledge where you feel you can depend on you. I could depend on me in so many areas, not on food, not in the context of food. I can now, but I was not able to for 62 years of my life. So by acknowledging everywhere that I can depend on me, I'm now starting to experience freedom unleashed. My breath has become deeper. Life force is flowing nicely. And then I can go into, okay, there is food and there is me. And we are partners. And we're going to coexist. We're going to coexist in an interdependent way. But I honor its worthiness and I honor my own. And then make choices coming from there. But for me, the sign on the food addiction part was this abandonment part. If anybody said anything like that, it wasn't about body shaming or anything. I wasn't that fussed about that. But it was like, you're asking me to abandon something that has always been there with me. The fourth sign is, it's a desire to blame. Desire itself is a strong feeling of wanting to have something, wishing for something to happen. So when you have a desire to blame, wishing for that to be real, you know that there is codependence playing out and you've surrendered your independence. And really all you have to do with these signs is, once you realize, oh, okay, it's a sign here, I'm going to reclaim my independence, immediately go into, where can I depend on me right now? And this blame part that I have this desire to blame, and when the desire to blame starts to rise within us, we see so many truths about the reasons why this blame is so justified. However justified it may be, simply acknowledge it. Don't go and get caught up into the blame cycle. Acknowledge it, yes. That way you retain your freedom and you can remain in a state of interdependence. The good news is, and that's what I learned from this 103-year-old man, the good news is you can always, have and acknowledge the interdependent relationship with nature. Even if everybody else lets you down, there is an interdependence that you can always have. There's always a partner with you. That interdependence vibe is still active and live. There is always something that you can depend on yourself, even if it is, your daily chores, pooping, peeing, you can depend on yourself to do that. Of, experience certain emotions, you may be able to depend on yourself to do that, whatever it may be. There's always a few things. So that breaks the pattern. That releases any form of disbelief in yourself or any form of doubt or distrust that you may hold within yourself. So learn to break your pattern by noticing these signs. When a desire, wishing for something to happen, is directed towards blame, you are in the realm of codependence. I had no idea that codependence did not necessarily need another person. It could simply be to a belief, the desire to be right about something, and you develop a codependent relationship there. So this is a sign. A desire to blame is a sign. Examine and step out of it by acknowledging all the blame that you wish to do as an acknowledgement, finding what it is that you can depend on yourself, and, really expressing your appreciation and gratitude to nature as your interdependent partner in that moment. You start to reclaim your own worthiness. You get into a state of strength. Now you can make choices. The fifth one is power games. Power games are signs. If you feel propelled to retain your walkaway power, I'm not going to give all of me here, just in case it doesn't work out and I have to walk away. You are actually destroying your independence, your ability to depend within. Or the power to control. I've got to retain the controlling power here. Or I have no choice, what can I do? This is what is expected of me. I'll be ostracized. Whatever it might be. It's like the food has never let me down. I'm feeling desperately sad and upset or anxious. Who can I go to? I can go to food. And I'm not connected to it. I'm just shoving it in my mouth and allowing my desperate desire to feel better within myself initially, and then allowing the food that I've eaten to completely dominate my being. Power games of any kind that might stir up, you've entered the realm where you're giving your independence away. Freedom is being choked out of you. And there's, even in that moment, there are things that you can depend on you. Your independence is actually the reality. You have to unleash it by acknowledging where you can depend on yourself, and then noticing every day, every little pieces, every little bit that you feel you can depend on you can depend on you. And ask the wonderful question that I say to the universe, which is, wow, this is amazing. How much better can it get? And it'll only start getting better and better. Sixth is balance, not harmony. I'm just going to read out the 6th and the 7th. But balance, not harmony, just a little bit more on that. If you are seeking to find balance, you are out of balance. You remain out of balance. You become very attached to staying out of balance if you are going to seek balance. Just imagine standing on a seesaw with your foot on either side, and you're the one that is doing the balancing act. You are out of balance. So if you feel that, oh, I've got to balance things, eggshells will very soon become your reality. Walking on eggshells will also start to occur. Walking on eggshells happens in a relationship. Codependence is going on there. So the first thing, the moment you notice any of these, the first thing is acknowledge what is going on. Don't do anything about it. Then you go and acknowledge where you can depend on yourself, reclaim some of that independence. Then you go into, who are my interdependent partners here? Now you've got the strength. And you enter a state of harmony within, and you can harmonize. The seventh is attachment, not connection. When you get attached, where like as if you're in a bind with a belief or a person or a thing or a cause, and you're attached about it, you know that there is this codependence is playing up, your own independence is being compromised. Get back into action by acknowledging that which you are attached to, and that allows you to distance yourself from it, and you connect to it, but more as an observer with the intention of acknowledging and multiplying and amplifying your ability to be dependent within yourself, and allowing interdependence as the way in which you relate, as the foundation for your relating from this point on. Over to you, Sunny.
Oh my goodness gracious. Thank you so much, Mynoo. And I just want to recap for everyone. Whoops, let me see if, oh no, I'm not going to undo that one. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Beautiful. We had a little techno, so I just want to make sure. I want to recap for you guys because I find that I lose sort of what's up. So I just want to recap. Language we use, loneliness, abandonment, desire to blame, power games, balance, not harmony, attach, not connect. This is such a powerful, powerful lesson this time, Mynoo. I really honor you and salute you and seriously honor you for the weeks and months we've been here. And we have one or two more, is that correct?
There are two pearls of wisdom left, and then we'll go into a whole different realm altogether.
Of course. Of course, you're not going to leave us with nothing to be hearing from you. Again, I want to honor you so much, and I want to honor all of us who've come here tonight to get this and share it with ourselves, our inner selves, and our circle, our inner circle, our outer circle. We are all the ripple effect, and we know about that. So let us incorporate this into our lives. And until next time, be well, everyone. And again, thank you so much, Mynoo, for this wonderful, wonderful Thursday or Friday.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the evening and the rest of the day. I declare our session complete. Thank you.